Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. Today is going to be the first day on the 31 days of Proverbs I'm going to be doing for the month of December. It's going to be one proverb each day correlating to the day of the month. So I hope you can stick with me, and I hope I can stick with me and get through this. And since today's the first of the month, we're going to begin on Proverbs 1. Alright, so it opens up talking about the reason for the Proverbs. First, it tells us that the Proverbs are written by Solomon, the son of David, who is the king of Israel. It says the reason of these proverbs is to know wisdom and instruction, and to perceive the words of understanding. So he's giving us these proverbs to pretty much as a father would give his son knowledge. He's giving us the words in this book as knowledge passed down. And from what he says, starting at verse 5, is a wise man will hear and will increase in learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. And then in verse 7 it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. He's telling you that a wise person will hear the words. It's almost like when someone who's wise hears something, they'll change their life and they'll try to understand it. But then he says, fools despise wisdom and instruction. I'm sure you've run into some people that they don't want to change. They don't want to know anything else. They don't want to fix their life, or they don't want any improvement. He's saying the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's not fear in a bad way, but fear is in respect of who God is, respect in the power that God has. And he's saying that is the beginning of knowledge, recognizing that everything comes from God. That is where you have to start. Then he goes on in verse 8 to say, my son, hear the instructions of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. It's not that you have to listen to every word people say. It's not that you have to follow the advice of everyone that tells you stuff. But he's saying, listen to it, hear the instruction. If somebody's trying to give you advice on something, listen to them and carefully consider it. Now, granted, you have to test it. Some people are going to give you advice that's bad advice, but you should be willing to listen to someone's opinion on the matter, especially if they have if the person's either in a place of authority or in a place of, knowing whatever you're going after, if they know it more, you should be open to listen, at least. He says, starting, at verse 10, though, it says, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And then later on in verse 15, my son, walk thou not in the way of them. Refrain thy foot from their path. For their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. So right away here, he's telling you, be careful what company you keep. If you know people that get into trouble, if you know people that are not wise, don't keep their company, because you're going to be ensnared by them. It says, for their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. He's saying that they hurry to evil. The people who, they seem to run after everything that's wrong. He's saying just be very careful on who you keep company with. Then right after this, starting at verse 20, going all the way to verse 33, it's very cool how he describes wisdom as a person. He's describing knowledge and wisdom onto a woman crying out in the street, almost like you'd say, in the middle of he says in the middle of the streets. Like, imagine you're walking on the road and you hear someone just crying out and trying to tell you something. That's what he's saying. That's what wisdom is. It's not difficult to find. At the beginning, he's saying, a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. And then here, when he's describing wisdom as a woman crying out in the street, it appears to me like he's saying that wisdom is not difficult to find. Wisdom is very easy, and especially now, I guess you call the information age with the internet nowadays, there's almost no excuse to be a fool. The only reason why you wouldn't know something, the only reason why you wouldn't have knowledge on a specific subject or anything is simply because you're being a sloth. It's saying, wisdom's calling out, saying, I've called you and you refuse. I've stretched out my hand and no one regards it. It's almost like how it seems like the world nowadays, they don't want the truth anymore. It's like people, they don't want to hear the word of God. They don't want to hear what's true. They just want to hear what they want to hear. As it says earlier, their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. They run to evil. It's like people, they run to what's comfortable and what they know, and they're not willing to, as it says, attain unto wise counsel. But then the part that gets a bit more frightening is later on here in verse 26, when it's talking about wisdom. It's saying that she will laugh at your calamity. It's saying, I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock you when your fear comes. And when your fear comes as desolation, and your desolation comes as a whirlwind, when distress and anguish comes upon you, then shall you call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, and they shall not find me. For that they hated knowledge, and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel, and they despised all of my reproof. Therefore, they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices. It's like if you don't plant food during the summer, if you're not ready for harvest when it comes, when you run into problems in life, when you run into things that you need knowledge, when you run into issues of discernment, anything in your life, if you haven't built up knowledge beforehand, if you haven't been seeking it, when that day comes, you won't be able to find it fast enough. You can't just learn everything in one day. If you're in college right now, you can't learn everything in one day. You have to go over the course of years in order to learn whatever trade or whatever career you're going into. If you were to, all of a sudden get a job in your field, but you've only gone through, 1 year of schooling, and you need a few more years of training, you're not going to know what to do. And in that day, it doesn't matter how much you're rummaging around, screwing, trying to find your butts, trying to, call people, ask for assistance. It's not going to work in that day because you haven't built your foundation yet. And that's what he's saying here, where unless you build your foundation of wisdom constantly, unless you build it up gradually through your life, unless you're seeking it, when you run into issues in your life, it's going to be nowhere to be found. You can't wait until a problem happens to deal with it. So while the message is a bit frightening, it's also hopeful, because in the last verse, verse 33, it says, "But whosoever hearken unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from the fear of evil." When you know what to do in a situation, when you have knowledge of a situation, you won't fear it anymore. For instance, death. Someone who doesn't believe in God and believe there's anything after this life is going to fear death. But once you know Christ and once you know where you're going, that fear dissipates because you realize this isn't the end. You realize there is life after death. And I'm sure you've even run into this at your job or even at school. Anytime you do something new, your first day on your job, you were probably fearful. You didn't know what to do. You didn't know where stuff was. You just, you were frazzled. So like in that way, you were kind of like the person who, they didn't have the knowledge of what to do when the situation came. But after you've worked at your job for a year, 2, 3 years, however long you've been at it, now it's like you'll dwell safely. You'll be quiet from the fear of evil. You don't worry when you walk in the door because you know what the building looks like. You're not lost anymore, where to go, where your chair is, where to sit down, where your station is. You have your routine down. You have knowledge. You have your wisdom of how you perform your job. And he's saying it's the same way just with life, because while you can have certain skills that pertain to your different trade, there's like wisdom and knowledge is just a general thing of it can be used in every facet of life. And that's what these proverbs are for. They're not trying to tell you how to become an electrician. It's not trying to tell you how to sell houses. He's trying to tell you how to simply to live life, where you can use these proverbs in any career, in any facet of life. So as the first proverb starts out, it's pretty fitting, telling you to, start seeking wisdom, which is exactly what you're doing by reading the first one here. And exactly what we're going to be trying to do through this whole month is just constantly, even though you may not, I guess you say, need it right now, you may not be in a season of your life where you're having to make decisions. You may not be on your own yet. You may not have any situations that, you need to make choices on. You may not have any tragedy you're trying to go through right now. But you start before that stuff happens. You have to start seeking wisdom before the day comes. Or else, once it comes, you won't know what to do. And that's what we're going to be trying to do here. So, that's the end of the first proverb. I don't know if that was concise at all. I'll probably get better as these go on. So, if the other thing you'd like to do would be read the next proverb of the day. Like right now, read Proverbs number 2. And then see what you get out of it. And then that way, once I put out the video tomorrow, you'll be able to see if you've caught the same things that I have, or to see, what you may have missed in it. With that, I'm going to leave you. And Lord willingly, I'll see you all tomorrow.